What you want to do is think deeply about, how do I get a lot of students? Well, have everyone know who you are and think that you're awesome and do great work, and have your marketing is your students that are going out in the world being well-rounded, well-adjusted, happy young people. And when someone says, oh my gosh, why is that person so happy and well-rounded? Well, they work with Eric, and that's been a really positive thing for them to learn music.
Hey, welcome back to another episode. With us again is Eric Branner. We had a conversation with him a little while back around mission and purpose in a school. And to be honest, we recorded these at the very, very same time, but we had such a wide variety of topics that we wanted to cover that we just said, hey, let's hit stop and keep each episode kind of siloed and pure and focused on one topic. So I'm not going to spend too much time introducing this one. I want to jump into it because one of the things that you talked about that was on your mind, Eric, was the idea of marketing flywheels. And that's a fancy term. I really, really like it. Maybe we could just start the episode by you briefly defining what that means to you. And then let's just kind of have an organic conversation around that and business. Absolutely.
It's good to see you again.
Yes.
Yeah, I am really fascinated by the concept of what we call a marketing flywheel. And the idea in physics is that a flywheel is a device that takes a lot of force to get going, right? You're pushing this large cylinder to get moving, right? And what happens is the flywheel gets that first rotation, it gets some energy into it, right? And that energy starts to help drive the circle. And so what we're doing is we're considering how we market our business, how we grow our businesses with great focus on getting the flywheel going, right? And there's different ways that we can put energy into our flywheel, right? And this is a way to think as a business owner of, okay, what does it mean? Okay, let's say we're a music school. What does marketing mean? Well, marketing is successful. You're doing it to get new students, to get leads, that is what they're, and so it should be very clear that what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a system that will eventually be very easy to keep going. Because once a flywheel is running, it kind of feels almost as though it's running itself. It's self-perpetuating in a lot of ways to get new students coming in, right? Mm-hmm. Now, this could be as simple as, as say I'm a single music teacher here in Seattle. I still get a couple calls every week about guitar lessons. And, I haven't been teaching full time for 6 years because I've been doing it forever. My flywheel was being very engaged in my community. And I've been doing it so long that those kids have grown up, and some of them are having kids now and wanting me to teach their kids. I mean, there's a lot of ways we can think about what makes a flywheel. Whether it's like, I do it through a combination of PPC, SEO, direct mailers, and blah, blah, blah. Or it can be as organic as, I've just done a really great job in my community for a really long time, and now my phone rings every day, right? Yes. So this is the marketing flywheel. And I think anybody that's listening, it's really important to think about where you are. And I'll go ahead and lead off with the number one thing that I see is people doing too many things without enough focus on the most basic things that can really get their flywheels going. So
interesting. What's the number one offender that you see there? Not a person. Like, what do you see?
Honestly,
go ahead.
Right away. Anything that is shiny, like to say, just get a Google or get a Facebook ads person, right? Yeah. And then you're printing leads, right? And it's like, do a TikTok campaign. You're going to be printing leads. And it's not that simple, because my phone rings because if you ask 5 people in Seattle in a certain community from all the schools my kids have gone to or that I've served forever, 3 of them are going to say you should try to get in with Eric, because I'm old. I've been doing it here forever. I've taught everybody for so long. And if they don't, you'll probably get referred to somebody else that they might be busy. And they'll be like, oh, you should probably go see Eric if he's got any openings. Right. So that's much more powerful than them flipping through a non-intent based search and like flipping through their Facebook and seeing an ad for your music school. I'm like, oh, maybe I should get Johnny, piano lessons. So,
yeah. So what's interesting about what you're saying there is that there is a longevity or there is a long tail to the fact that you're so well known in this community. But how did you build that way back in the day when this was more your focus? What was it that you did 10 years ago or 20 years ago that led to that kind of top of mind referring activity by anyone in those 5 schools or that community?
Okay. I can answer that really quickly. And it's because of something Nate just said in our last talk about the teacher he was 30 years ago to the teacher that he is now. When I first moved to Seattle, I taught, and it all comes down to a very focused group of people that was, I was teaching in a music school at a really great local music store here. And the owner of the music store and I got along really well. He's a legend in the Seattle music scene. He started referring me to all of his friends. And he would be hanging out at a softball game with his buddy and say, "Oh, I got the guy that should teach you how to play for your 50th birthday." And I would start, and then I got one of those guys. We were featured on the cover of the Seattle Times together because he was a really well-known architect, and we became fast friends. That guy was so cool that when Allison got pregnant with our first kid, he asked us to move in with him so we could pay off all of our stuff and build out a new music studio so we could start this new life with a really awesome place in the business in place. That story got, and during that time, I was, to what Nate said, I was not the teacher that I am now, but I was so enthusiastic. There is energy in being a youthful person who loves to teach, right? So although I wasn't as good of a teacher as I might be now, I was totally into it. And I did these initiatives like the Guitar Barbecue, where I would have 200 people come and I'd cook for them, right? And my daughter would hang out when she was a baby in my studio on the floor. And all my students knew her. I did not teach my daughter guitar, and she's ripping now. My students did when they babysat her. And so it was just a community, right? And the more people we had teaching, and the whole thing just kind of happened very naturally from a few people.
I have to say this before I kick it to you, Nate, that if you're taking notes, and I've had people email us and say, I take notes when I listen to your podcast, but if you're taking notes, you say, okay, meet such and such a person and then move in with them. Like, it doesn't work that way, but there is a deeper principle that's work underneath it, is that the kismet, the chance happenstance that those things happen came because of relationship. That is the takeaway here. So you might not be teaching guitar, so you can't throw a guitar barbecue, but there is a sense that if you're moving out into the community with good intention, just wanting to build relationships, that doesn't scale necessarily, but boy, does it start building relationships, which then lead to those things later. And every one of us, as Eric pointed out at the beginning, while we were talking before we hit record, if the 3 of us all opened a school, it would have a very different feel. Similarly, when you start operating in this way, the kinds of things that'll happen to you are the kinds of things that would happen to you, not to Eric or to Nate or to me. You got to do things that don't scale sometimes. Alongside of the things that are more programmatic and tried and true.
Yeah, I think you should repeat that, because is that you need to do both. You need to have something in your marketing flywheel that does not scale, and then you need to have things in your marketing flywheel that do scale, right? Because it's different if you run a Facebook ad and you're doing all this community outreach, and someone sees your Facebook ad after they heard from a friend about the recital you just put on, and like, is that the person? Is Daniel is that the person whose school that was that did that? Because then that's the flywheel perpetuating itself.
Absolutely. One very, very short question. Have you actually, because I haven't seen this, but this is more curiosity. Have you actually seen people recommending TikTok ads?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Or you are using TikTok deeply as their strategy. I mean, Snapchat and TikTok are like the two. Yeah. A lot, depending, and especially if you're selling a product.
Okay.
Right. For any kind of product based marketing, like they're saying that's value of Facebook ads 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
The reach.
I sometimes forget that you are plugged into more communities than just the music teacher community. So maybe you're seeing it in communities outside of what I'm used to seeing, because I've yet to see someone really push that as the next wave of how music schools will get students. But I just had to ask. Nate, I'm curious. What do you got? I'm sure you've got some questions over there.
I want to go back to when you were defining flywheel, Eric, because there's a part of your definition that's so important for us not to forget, which is, you said it requires an enormous amount of initial force to even get the thing rolling. And it kind of brought to mind this question of stages of energy we have as founders. Like in that early stage, you were saying you were so psyched to teach, but you were clearly so psyched to do all kinds of things, because you were not just teaching, you were going out into the community. The fact that you were throwing a guitar barbecue and you were cooking for them is amazing, because people don't think, let me cook for a bunch of people as their strategy.
Right.
You know what I mean? They don't think that way. However, my guess is that everybody listening actually has a version of that in them.
Yes.
That would work. And so let's go back to the initial force moment. You're young, you're doing it, you're in Seattle, you're psyched, you're going out, you're trying every idea, including a guitar barbecue. How is it that someone can choose where to put their energy initially? Because you're risking so many, you have to risk the most valuable thing you have, which is your time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a great question. I think that first initial phase, I like to think of it as the hustle. Like, yeah, you might be hanging up. There's a time when, if you have to make something happen, I didn't want to work. My dad was a serial entrepreneur. I never wanted to really work for anybody else. I was very motivated to be self-employed and to make a living as a musician. So when I worked at a grocery store, at a little corner store, I had my guitar there and I'd play behind the counter, and I got students that way, and I got a kid's birthday party. That was one of my first students that became a client. Like I hung up flyers. I did that whole thing. It's like, so I think when you first start, you have to be willing to make mistakes, and you have to just go for it. And you have to begin with, understand what you want to do. I want to get students. So many people do their marketing to be like, oh, we're building brand. We're trying to build name recognition. And it's like, you're not really marketing towards what your end goal is, right? What you want to do is think deeply about, how do I get a lot of students? Well, have everyone know who you are and think that you're awesome and do great work, and have your marketing is your students that are going out in the world being well-rounded, well-adjusted, happy young people. And when someone says, oh my gosh, why is that person so happy and well-rounded? Well, they work with Eric, and that's been a really positive thing for them to learn music, or Eric's school, or it's, I think that in the grind phase, you have to be ultra focused on doing a lot, seeing what sticks, dropping things that don't work, and having the wisdom to know when some things take time. Right. This is the thing we never know. It's like, let's say I'm trying to do this thing. I'm hanging up flyers, and I hang up 100 flyers and I get nothing. Then I hang up 101 flyers and 2 people get torn off. And one of them is someone who owns, a daycare where you end up getting 40 students from it. Like, you just never know. I mean, I'm sure you both can say this thing.
Oh yeah.
The same thing. As you go through your life, you'll have, like, I've been in a period in myself right now where I've really desperately needed some big wins for the amount of energy that I put into the world. And I have not felt like I've gotten them. And I've been starting to lose the faith that they were going to come, and they're starting to come, and they've been coming. And it was like I'm in the middle of a 6-year project right now. Yeah. Right. And after 4 years, you start to be like, wow, this is exhausting. Yeah. And you're like, should I maybe be pivoting to do something else? Should I be moving this in a new direction? Am I crazy? And then suddenly it all happens, like in one day. 3 cool things will happen you can't believe happened, right? That you've been waiting for. And so that's reality that I think all of you that own your own business would agree with.
Absolutely.
Eric, that brings up this idea that I'm constantly journaling about for myself, which is the differentiator between navigation and activation. And it's like, if you're so clear on your navigation, your personal compass, i.e., you described it, you're not marketing I'm not marketing Brooklyn Music Factory, the brand. I'm marketing the transformation of a family that joins us on a 10-year journey. That's actually what I'm marketing, is just that what the transformation looks like. Most likely 7 to 10 years from now, you will have a family band, because that's what so many Brooklyn Music Factory students start out as, a student that then the whole family's playing, right? And so that's actually what we're marketing. But around your faith comment, which is so important for us to pause on, because I do not question, nor do I hear in you questioning around the personal compass, the navigation, a 6-year project, that's a long-term commitment, right? What happens is that when we get chinks in the armor, when we don't get the big win we needed, it's almost like, or what happens to me is that you mentioned this when we were chatting on a previous episode, I can tend to go inward, which leads to less activation.
And less confidence.
Yeah, I don't have quite the confidence I did, so I don't act as often. And then when I find myself sort of whatever procrastinating or whatever version I do, less action, more existential crisis. Well, maybe I'm not actually doing the right thing. Maybe I should pivot my entire life. What happens is I've totally reduced the chance of having the chance encounter you just described 15 minutes ago, right? Or even 5 minutes ago, where you're like, you don't know who's going to pull the tab. It could be the woman who runs the daycare down the street, and so I'm wondering if you can just share, and then I do have a second follow-up, but I'm wondering if you can share how you've been managing just faith in your long-term projects personally. Like, what are some of the practices that you're working through that are helping you?
You know what? To be honest, I'd say that's not something I'm great with. That's my weakness, is I hold every project way too close. Like if I were to have a great executive coach, they'd be like, you hold this way too closely. I stay up at night worrying about our investors. I stay up at night worrying about our customers. I'm a inveterate worrier. My granny was a worrier. That's like and I think it's a gift in that I care so much about the work that I do, and I always have, but I do not have a healthy relationship with it. So I'm definitely not the guy to ask about it. I am someone who wakes up pretty much every night between 2:30 and 3, often, having a hard time breathing, and I get up and I meditate through it, do some work. But that's been the average for me for years. And so that's baked into me. And it's like, I used to just kind of hide it because I'm also very positive, right? But that's the area I struggle most with. So not a pro in that department. So if you have any great recommendations, I'd appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you being so open and transparent about it, because you have an incredible optimism, dude. And I guess we met a couple years ago, maybe. But I've certainly followed you, and I love how engaged you are with the community, whether it's like, on Facebook or just you're always reaching out, you're bringing people together, you're asking like, how can we help one another? I think it's super valuable for our listeners to know that, hey, you know what? It's not always pretty. It's hard to maintain that level of optimism, and it's a work in progress, like everything. I'm with you. I have tripled down on my meditation practice to try to maintain as much peace and joy as I can in any given day. And I do not mess with my routine in the morning, because honestly, the day just unravels if I do.
Those are critical tools for the times we're living in. Critical tools. And go ahead. No, I was just going to follow up when you said that, there is that element of, trying to choose to remain optimistic. And people will really turn on you on that, and they'll call you out and be like, "What's up, Pollyanna," or whatever. And but what's your alternative, right? Is like, if you don't choose that path of trying to keep your mind in check, like, the alternative is not keeping your mind in check. So to me, it's a pretty clear decision to do everything you can, even if you don't mean it, to try to keep that optimism going, because the alternative sucks. Right. And it spirals. So
no kidding.
Let's talk maybe we can wrap on this, around this idea of how you link sort of this concept of the marketing flywheel to what you said is essential, which is ultimately having a sustainable business that can last maybe well beyond even the founder. I wonder if you could just talk in closing around why you link those two things.
And go ahead, Nate.
No. That's just, Daniel, thoughts?
And I would say I would make those comments in light of something that would be helpful to a mid-sized to larger school owner. Obviously, we all have our different experiences, and we all have different perspectives on that. Business is business, but I think we all have the wisdom here, especially working with school owners and being them. How can we apply that to that market to kind of bring it more back to who we're talking to with this podcast?
Sure. Yeah, I think that the marketing flywheel into a sustainable model, and and you have to also begin, like, Nate, you're at a point with your school, you're 12 years in, is that organization, right, has seen a lot, it's done a lot, you've reached a certain level that it's like really difficult to take it to like a totally, like, whatever that next level would be, right? Because you run out of space, you're serving your market, you run out of, you can't just willy-nilly charge more. So you're constantly having to be like, well, how do we optimize? And so optimization is a really important concept. That's really what you're saying you're doing. When you say edit, you're like, how can I optimize? How can I remove constraints to make things work better, to keep customers being more recurring, to have them last with us longer? And you have to be really crafty. But I think that if you're going as a general building your marketing flywheel, you have to say, okay, cool, I'm a mid-sized music school, I've gotten to a certain level, I know something about business, I've got my admin. So yeah, your flywheel, the number one thing that I see is a lack of focus. I would rather say a mid-sized music school, just be good at Google ads than even do any of the other stuff we talked about, right? If you have one thing that you're good at to bring leads in, that I do think intent-based, if for people that are listening, you probably know what we're talking about. Intent-based makes a lot more sense at that level, right? I know that there's a great music school right down the road for me that I really love. Right now, they're super pushing. There's a band that came out of there that's doing really well called Them. It's like a girl teenager. I think they're gonna do something with themselves. They're just playing all the farmers markets. They're playing all these little gigs. My daughter goes and sees them.
Wow.
They're very affiliated with the school. Like, that's on the flip side. This is brilliant marketing, right? Is they're taking a successful group and they're promoting the crap out of them, right? So I really appreciate schools that have focus, right? And you say, yeah, we need to gen leads through Google ads, and we're going to put $1,000 a month into that, and that's going to give us this thing. And then we have our team really focus on the outreach, or the things that, or if we have a really charismatic founder, put that founder out front, have them doing what you're doing, playing drums at the stands, because that's what people remember. It's like the Maya Angelou thing. It's like people remember how you made them feel. Right. And like in any organization that isn't doing that isn't like, yeah, you put together family bands, that makes people feel wonderful. They're connecting with their kids. Oh my gosh, if you can't sell that, there's something wrong with you, right? It's like, that's sellable. And, and so it's how we move that message. And you're right, Daniel, TikTok isn't the place to move that, because that's not where it goes. So I think that would be my encouragement for anybody we work with. And we see it so quickly. A new school comes onto the platform, and the schools that are doing, that 900 to 1.5 million in transactions and revenue a year, and consistently growing, going from 500,000 to 1 million and then up again. Those firms, they've got that baked in. Somebody's taught them how to do that. They're killing Google ads, right? They're and they've got that data. People that get so excited about saying, oh, we're going to just really go for SEO so hardcore. And they're going to it takes a long time to build SEO well. And it takes a serious expert, and it's ever changing. You get your SEO dialed in, Google can pull that out from under you immediately. It happens. So I think focus and discipline, because if you look on the groups, I'll finish it by saying, and you see people change so quickly, right? And this is where having somebody you're working with, like a coach, that can help guide you to know when to stay with what you're doing and when to cut and run, because it's real easy to say, I tried Google ads for a week, nothing. God damn it. Now I'm gonna do Facebook ads for a month. I found this great Facebook person. Oh, I got an SEO coming in. Can someone build me a new website? Because I want to do that. Like, you'll see people go through that cycle in 6 weeks.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And it's like, so, I'd say balance it, long tail strategy, which is everything we've talked about today, with making sure you have some kind of intent-based lead gen, right, to balance that. And then it's all to your sales process and your product.
100%.
It feels to me like what I keep hearing is this balance which is there are very specific techniques. Like Daniel, this is how Daniel and I met, was around improving the funnel for Brooklyn Music Factory. We focused almost exclusively on improving the Google Ads funnel, right? But it seems to me like there's an important balance. There's a balance between that technique you're talking about, Eric, and then there needs to be some very intentional sort of use of the resources you have that are more organic and community focused. So like, I think it's important to say that again. Like when me going out to sit at the camp tables is like you going out, you cooking for a whole bunch of people at the guitar barbecue is like, it's like, Daniel, you're great at getting on an open-ended call with anybody who has any question around music schools. You're amazing at that. That's your zone, right? And so like, to me, it's a balance between those two things. So if you're listening to this, ask yourself what you'd show up to every week for the next 3 years if you knew that there was a long-term benefit, long tail benefit to your business that you would just do whether you were getting paid or not. Because the reality is I would go play drums whether I was getting paid or not with a bunch of kids. I would write a song with them, So I wonder if I can close with one last question, because I'm fascinated by the fact that you get to engage, Eric, with, like basketball coaches that are using Fonz and piano teachers that are using Fonz. And they might be different size businesses. They may not be. They might be the exact same gross. You might see the same amount coming through both of those small businesses. Is there like, share with us one similarity between those two very different businesses, coaching your son versus teaching him guitar. Like,
I can tell you, because this is my wife's an actor. I'm a guitar player. Both of our kids are fabulous athletes. So we knew nothing about this. And so we, and my best friend was a professional tennis player. So we have invested heavily in their mentorship, heavily. And we know what to look for in someone that's got that passion. You can't fake that. Like the people that are really into doing this work, we will beat out people that are just generic business owners that want to own a franchise of a music school any day, or you're doing something wrong, right? That's like the first thing. But I'd love to, one of my son's basketball coaches, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and this is to where product marketing is in his world. My son is in AAU basketball. He's 10 years old. Everyone says, don't do AAU. It's like they scream and they yell. The parents get in fights at the games. There's technical fouls. And this is all true. I've seen all of this happen. And, here's me. It's like, I'm passive. I'll hug anybody. I'll bring orange slices for halftime. I'm not fighting anybody. Like, this is not happening. But my son, this coach is so passionate, and it's old school. It's yelling. It is, you miss a free throw and you practice walking around the gym saying, I lost the game. I lost the game. Wow. And I'm like, this is terrible. My son is thriving so much in this environment, and he's having so much fun with the community he's built and the people that he's meeting, he's going to play with. He is like, it is that respecting that people are different and that we can all offer, like the coach of this particular program is hell-bent on teaching them resilience and the pain that can come with being a high-level athlete and drilling every day. That's 2.5 hours a day of practice 4 days a week. And most kids it's not for them, but for a subset, it's perfect. So this coach is delivering a product that he believes in that most people don't want. Yeah. He's got 100 kids signed up to max capacity for his summer camps the day he opens them up. Because these kids aren't just in Seattle. They're coming from an hour away to come to this. Because if you want to be really good, you go there. My son went to this camp for like 3 weeks, and he went from being kind of playing part of the game, never starting. He's a core starter on his team now. It is create a flywheel within himself of success. So and this is the idea, is that we create a product that people will either want to leave people come to lessons with me and they walk out and they feel like, wow, I had a great time being with Branner. He loved me. He heard me. We played music together. I got a little bit better. And they look forward to coming in, and those moments, this style of coaching that you see in athletics sometimes can be, you look forward to walking out of. You're scared to go. You're going to get yelled at. It's going to be hard and torturous. But when you walk out, you're going to be close to your goal. And music can do this too, right? And it's like something that it allows us to be authentic, lean into what we want to. And I'm sorry I'm taking so long talking about it, but I'm fascinated by it. And I'm looking at all these different coaches, and it's the ones that do know what they want to do, right? I don't need to I was a concert classical guitar player, but I'm not going to make competition winners. That's not my trip. But I know somebody that could be. That's a different skill set. And I think the people that can lean into that, that's success.
Yeah.
What I hear you saying is you have to be hot or cold. You can't be lukewarm. And if a restaurant were to open and they say, hey, the strategy to win here, it's to offer every kind of cuisine. So we're going to have Mexican, we're going to have sushi, we're going to have Americana, we're going to have bratwursts and beer. Like, that restaurant would fail. You've got to pick something. And the two biggest problems that I see in music schools are either they do try to have a little bit of everything, and they don't have anything that makes them unique. Like this basketball coach, not only do you know who wants to go there, you want to have people that would never dream of going there, and then, or the other thing is just maybe, and I've found this less frequently, but there's actually a teacher who's doing brilliant work, but they simply don't know how to communicate what makes them unique. They don't have those skills yet. I was in a session today with a bunch of my marketing clients, and one of them just exasperatedly said, I wish I could just hire someone to do this. And I stopped everything. And I said, here's the deal. This is the fantasy that everybody has, that there's someone out there, the copywriter, the Facebook ads person, that could do all this for you. They cannot. And I have proof, and we don't have the time for me to tell this story. Maybe I'll tell it sometime in the future. But I used to build marketing for schools, and I'm very good at it. And the marketing I built for some schools would work like gangbusters. And then I would build the exact same stuff for another school, and it wouldn't work at all. And it was because of the environment I was building it in. The hard skills that you need to have as a school owner / business owner is communication skills and the creativity to begin to look at the words coming out of your clients' mouths and know how to turn that into marketing and messaging, and know how to respond to it, get out in front of people, anticipate. And all this is connected to what you're saying there, Eric, which is this idea of you need to be the hero to someone and the villain to someone else. And this might be easier to do if you're a basketball coach, but you can do it as a music teacher too. Yes. There were people that left my studio and they're like people who email me like, we're not enrolling him. And I was fine with that, because I could feel the instant I started that lesson with him that it was not a good fit.
And that's the best thing that can happen.
Absolutely.
Is to know that.